Hello, listeners to the Wholehearted podcast, and welcome to another episode. Today's episode, I have been looking forward to for a very, very long time because I'm a big fan of Matthew Koh. I met Matthew Koh through LinkedIn, and since then we have caught up. And I remembered we had a long, long conversation that it just felt like time stood still when we are talking. So let me introduce Matthew a little. Matthew is the founder of the Positive Arena, where he uses positive psychology and coaching to enhance individual, school, and organizational well-being. His interest in positive psychology was initially sparked by the growing prevalence of mental health issues among youth in schools. He is also a passionate, award-winning educator who has taught and nurtured thousands of youths throughout his decade-long teaching career in tertiary education institutions. Matthew has a Master of Science in Applied Positive Psychology and Coaching, Psychology, and he's an Associate Certified Coach with the International Coaching Federation with more than 500 hours of coaching experience. He's the author of the book Teach Less, Coach More, and has been recognized as the top 20 life coaches in Singapore by Smart Singapore, and also very recently LinkedIn Top Voice. Congratulations, Matthew. Welcome to the Wholehearted podcast.
Thank you so much, Coen, for having me. I'm really honored, to be here on your podcast. Looking forward to our conversation today.
I'm so excited. Can you see? So I'm just going to start the podcast with a question we typically ask our guests. What does being a wholehearted leader mean to you?
Wow. I don't know, what comes to my mind is this concept of servant leadership. I think a good leader who is wholehearted in leading the team is also able to put himself at the ground level and understanding the challenges that they might be going through, having that empathy, having or rendering that support that they need. And to me, right, most importantly, the element of trust. I think it must be there.
Trust for people or people trusting them?
People trusting them as leaders.
Fantastic. So what do you think are some of the obstacles of people living wholeheartedly?
The obstacles, I think, we live in such a fast-paced world, especially in Singapore, right? I think two things. I think number one is how the environment affects and influences us. There are people who might be very passionate about the work that they want to do, but there's, I always tell people, and when I do coaching, right, you might know your strengths, your values, your skill sets, your interests, but there's one missing element: opportunities. When there are no opportunities, you see that there are people who might be so wholehearted about doing something, but they couldn't shine. So that's one. I think the second one that affects them is the influence by people around them. People, I think we all know, we meet with people who will give us so much advice, the naysayers, and while you are still exploring what you truly are passionate about, we tend to follow what the masses do. If I were to give a metaphor, right, we are all the captains of our own sailboats as we sail across different seasons of life, and we are more, perhaps some of us, we are more affected or influenced by looking at other people's boats. Where are they going? It seems like that path is more successful. Maybe I should follow that as well. And I think that affects the wholeheartedness that we have in terms of leading our lives. Some of us, we might achieve success in different ways, status, fame, but deep inside, they don't feel that level of wholeheartedness or that feel of purpose or that sense of meaning in their life. Yeah.
Wow. So what I'm hearing is that they become dislocated from their own heart's direction.
Yeah, that true self-identity, if I would say.
Over the last 20 years, I would say there's been this whole authenticity movement, right? It's like this whole thing is like, oh yeah, be your authentic self, right? Do what you want. But I think that sometimes it's gone a little too far on the other side, right? And people are just going to be myself, right? I'm not going to care about how I show up to other people, how I'm being received by other people. I just want to be myself, right? So where do we draw the line? Where do we have this balance, right? How do we this two-way street? How do we allow this two-way street to continue to flow?
Yes, I think you rightly pointed out one of these phenomena that we are observing, because you see, when positive psychology first started, people might even misinterpret it as a me, myself, and I movement, where we learn about well-being. People start to talk about self-care, But I think as Asians, as we live in a collectivistic culture growing up, I think there must be a balance. Even in the workshops that I deliver to corporate organizations or even schools, I believe in a me to we approach. So it's never about just me. So even when we talk about managing our emotions, building resilience, I mean, we can apply it on our individual life in individual levels, right? But as we come together as a group at the systemic level, this well-being, individual well-being, shouldn't be lived out in such a way where it's at the compromise of someone else's well-being. That's what I feel. So whatever that we do in terms of being that authentic self, I think we need to ask ourselves, when we show up, the actions, the words that we use, are we kind of affecting someone else's well-being just because we want to be truly 100% ourselves,
Yeah.
So, and I think there's always a different way of putting it, across. Like, we can be assertive, but let's not be aggressive.
Yeah.
No point caring about ourselves and then the whole team is dying because of you trying to take care of yourself, right? So this element of we, especially in the Asian context, is where I think it's really about the team coming together to co-create. It's also not one person saying, okay, this is me and I think at we should do this.
Yeah.
That's also wrong.
Yeah.
So it's really coming together, being open, understanding each of us, who we are, what are our values, and being able to accept and find that consensus. And of course, that requires a lot of open conversations.
Wow. I mean, I'm learning so much. I'm really taking mental notes. Even as an entrepreneur myself, right, leading a team, sometimes I always want my team to flourish, but I also wonder how much of it sometimes I'm being a little too heavy-handed in terms of it's kind of like me rather than me to we, right? And I think you just touched on something, and what I'm hearing, right, is the word that came to me is this idea of psychological footprint. We've been talking a lot about carbon footprints, right? It's like, are we leaving a good carbon footprint, right? What's the carbon footprint we are leaving behind? But we don't often think about our psychological footprint, right? Like how we show up in the world. Are we engendering wellness in people? Are we threatening their safety just by how we show up? Maybe we are too aggressive, or maybe we show up in a very abrasive manner, or maybe we are more of takers rather than givers, right? So like we said, we're always asking, what can I receive? What can I get? And we're actually leaving a huge psychological footprint. And so that's something that I started thinking about, and that's the word that came to me as I'm listening to you. And since you sort of like open this box a little, just kind of like keep it ajar, I want to open this box fully, right? You talk about wellness, right?
Yes.
So I want to ask you about a topic that we discussed before prior to this podcast, the idea of sustainable wellness. So would you be willing to dive deeper into the sustainable wellness?
Yeah, I think ever since the pandemic, I think there's increasing common understanding that individual well-being is important. We have all been through that season of languishing, if I would say, during the circuit breaker. We are all locked up in our own homes, and we started to understand, have more empathy and understanding that, oh wow, that's why people feel depressed, when we are left alone, feeling that loneliness. So conversations started opening up. And I think at workplaces, even in schools, well-being is becoming an integral element or part of what we would say a flourishing organization or a flourishing school. But I think based on my recent experiences, even as a trainer, as a speaker, as I speak to different corporate leaders, school leaders, they will say things like, oh, Matthew, our people, we have this problem. They don't have growth mindset. They don't have this. They don't have that. Can you come in? And I hope that through that 1 hour talk or through the half a day workshop, they will have growth mindset thereafter. So people are looking at quick fix. People are looking at training and speaking as quick fixes. Now, I'm not trying to say that training and speaking is not impactful or not important. But I think in order to make it work effectively, it's a collaborative relationship between the trainer, speaker, and the organization or the school.
Yeah.
It's really looking deeper into, at a systemic level, what are your company cultures? What are your company policies, your school policies? How do you make sure that you create a sustainable well-being? And I thought I wanted to share with you some very interesting insights that I read from two well-being reports. One is the Deloitte 2023 Well-being at Work Survey, and the other one is Mindshare Partners 2023 Mental Health at Work report, where they do some surveys, with employees as well as C-suites. And listen to this, I think it's quite interesting. 74% of employees felt that well-being is more important than career advancement. 41% of employees believe that their companies are making progress in terms of well-being initiatives, human sustainability, in contrast with 89% of C-suites who feel the same, which highlights that there's a disconnect in the perceptions of the C-suites as compared to their own employees. And in fact, employees are now looking at sustainable, healthy work cultures instead of self-care perks and resources.
Wow.
So sometimes organizations may be quick to share, yeah, you all want well-being, right? Yeah, we got a well-being speaker. Yeah, we got well-being training for you. Yeah, go for some mindfulness workshops.
Yep.
But I think it's beyond just that.
Yep.
I think we need to look at it from a more holistic perspective, and also I think if I would just share, there was a conversation between me and another lady from LinkedIn. She's also a HR related leader, and she shared with me something interesting. She said a lot of employees feel that if I need to speak to my manager, it means that my performance has issues.
Mm.
But that shouldn't be the way.
No.
Actually, managers should communicate with your employees even when they have done a good job.
Yeah.
So a lot of employees are against the idea of, you mean I need to meet with my bosses like once a month? So I think sustainable well-being comes into, yes, your external efforts that you're putting in, like your well-being speakers, trainers, coaches, but what are you also doing internally so that it provides that beautiful picture of how do you intend to sustain that well-being at the systemic level? Yeah.
That's fantastic. I think it's so important, right? I mean, having that regular conversation, right? I mean, we often think about, for example, if the roads are not moving, the traffic is not moving, the roads are jammed up, you say that we have a bad traffic. If our blood is not circulating in our body, we are said to have bad health. And if money is not being spent in the economy, we are saying that we are not having a good economy. We are having a bear economy, not a bull economy. But we don't think of communications the same way too. If communications are not flowing, then we are not having a flourishing, thriving, safety, mattering and belonging kind of an environment, a culture, isn't it?
Yes.
And so that dialogue, that two-way conversation needs to be more promoted.
Yeah, and I guess it's also to be more authentic and sincere, if I would say. I don't know whether I should share this now, but I just gave a training to a team of working professionals who are high flyers, and during that workshop, I shared about this building trusting teams. And we talk about building trust, 4 elements. Okay, sincerity, reliability, competence, and care. So we often use these words like, oh, that person is not trustworthy, that person cannot be trusted. But sometimes it could be one of these 4 pillars or dimensions that are lacking that results in lowering a person's trustworthiness.
Yeah.
So when we talk about conversations with people, leaders to your employees or even between colleagues, we need to ask ourselves, how do people perceive how trustworthy we are? And if you look at these 4 elements, sincerity means you mean what you say, and you do. I mean, you mean what you say lah. So whatever that you say, you really do it.
Yep.
And it's not about you. It's not about people telling you what you're supposed to do and you didn't deliver. So it could be as simple as, let's say, you are my colleague Coen, and we are in a cafe, and I said, oh, I don't like to eat meat. Yeah, I prefer eating salad. I dislike meat. And then another day, you see me in a restaurant eating meat. You start thinking, hey, how come this person don't really mean what he said? That's sincerity, And reliability is when you give promises to people, when you say things like, yeah, I will help you, do you really deliver? When you overpromise and underdeliver, that's when you're not reliable. And then the third one is competence. So do people see competency in you in carrying out certain tasks or certain job tasks that you're allocated with? The last one is care. We see a lot of leaders who might be able, who might be very sincere, might be very reliable, very competent, but they don't care. And once they don't care, you'll notice that employees will not share with you what they're going through. They only share with you the transactional part of what the work entails, but you notice that it's no longer relational. Yeah.
That's why they say the leaders are lonely, right? But I don't think leaders necessarily have to be lonely. I think because they don't create psychological safety for information to flow upwards, and therefore they don't get information flowing upwards, and they are in their own ivory tower, and they are suffering from what is called the CEO disease.
Correct.
I think Richard Boyatzis and Daniel Goleman, in their book Primal Leadership, they call this the CEO disease.
Oh.
Yeah, and also I think you talk about trust. I really love that idea of trust, and one of the most seminal books I read about this is Stephen M.R. Covey, who wrote a book about the speed of trust, and he talked about how organizations are paying a trust tax.
Wow.
So imagine, this deep, right? So imagine if your leader says something, but you only believe 50% of what your leader say. So what happens is that you're already paying a 50% tax, even without knowing you're paying a tax, right? We
Yeah.
think of tax in terms of money. But if you're paying a trust tax, how much lost productivity, how much lost profitability, and how much lost energy.
Yeah.
And I just want to circle back to something you mentioned, something about they expect you to come and do a 1 hour session and to teach their people growth mindset. But I think the premise of it is already a little flawed, right? Because the reason why they're asking you to teach their people a growth mindset, they are already having a pre-assumption that their people have no growth mindset.
Yeah.
And therefore they need to be taught to have a growth mindset.
Yeah.
And this is really very much a kind of deficit thinking.
Yes.
A deficit thinking is like there's a deficit, there's a gap, and therefore we need to
Fix
plug
it.
that gap.
Yeah.
Fix it, right? But instead of what you mentioned, the word you mentioned earlier on about wholeheartedness is about living with intrinsic motivation. What if we were to assume that people already have latent intrinsic motivation that needs to be unleashed or brought up
Yeah.
rather than to be kind of like taught? So I think since you are a positive psychology practitioner, right? I'm sure you have quite a lot to say about that. Can you share a little bit more about how looking at things through the lens of positive psychology can really help organizations move forward?
I think at the end of the day, each of us as individuals, I think this is also important for us to reflect. When we talk about motivation, I think we know that there's intrinsic motivation, there's extrinsic motivation, and amotivation, which is you're completely not motivated by it. And I think we need to be aware. It is not right to say that all of us need to be intrinsically motivated. It's very hard. I'll give you an example. I mean, if my mom's friend's son got married, asked me to go for the wedding dinner, but I don't know him, I'm completely amotivated to go for that wedding dinner, right?
Yep.
So it is also not right to say that in life we must be intrinsically motivated by everything. No, it don't work that way. But I think in the context of work, we need to first find out what drives us and what drains us. Because if you are to find something, you have to find something that really drives you, where you go into that state of flow, so flow means that the level of challenge and the level of skill sets are aligned, and you feel that when you're doing it, you lose track of time. You are in that space, in that zone. You're kind of like in your element.
Yep.
Or what people say, you are having that runner's high, right? And
Yep.
and are you able to identify instances at your workplace where you experience that? So I normally ask my clients that just reflect back. It could be your current or your previous workplaces. What exactly about it is it life-giving to you, or was it engaging for you?
Yep.
And everyone is different.
Yeah.
So for me, it's always teaching in a class, coaching my clients. I think when you are so in control without yearning that control, that's when you are in flow.
Yep.
So I think that helps to build that intrinsic motivation. And some people also challenge me and say, Matthew, I I don't find my meaning and purpose at work. I don't think I'm someone who feels that we need to be intrinsically motivated at work. I mean, that's fine. Each of us, we have our own ways of leading our lives. I think at the end of the day, is that we need to know what constitutes meaning in our life, and it could be outside of our work premises. So I'm seeing there are a few people, the way that they redesign their life so that it's meaningful. There are a few ways. Number one is that you truly find meaning in the work that you do, as well as having some form of meaning in your personal life. But there's also a group of people who might feel that, I'm here to work so that the money that I earn, I will find meaning outside of my work life.
Yeah.
I've seen people doing that as well. I mean, we can't really force people to say, you can't do that, you need to find meaning at work. It really comes back to the values of individuals. What are your values? And I think for me, it's really about, if I'm the leader, I really have very open conversations to find out from my employees, what are their values? And if they tell me, they say, I dislike work, rather than saying, okay, I'll leave you alone, can we co-create together and brainstorm to see what we can do together to make work at least a bit more interesting for you? You might not thrive, but I also don't want you to languish and get burnt out. Let's try to see what is that one baby step that we could take to make your work experience better than yesterday. I think that is important, that kind of conversations,
Oh, so deep, so much to reflect on there. It's like when you talk about languishing, right? And also the idea of quiet quitting, or in mainland China, we call this 躺平, or 摆烂, right? Right, just kind of cruising, but you actually end up leaving there to rot. But I think that I believe that there's atrophy in all this, right? If you don't move forward, you're actually moving backwards, right? And what I realize is that when you start going to this danger zone, is you're actually developing bad habits. You're not just having bad physical habits, but really bad mental and psychological habits. And so if you take things easy, you give less than 100%, it suddenly becomes normal for you to give less than 100%. And then you expect that one day when you find that right job, the dream job, you're going to put your foot to the pedal, the pedal to the metal. Right, you put your foot to the pedal, and suddenly you're able to go like zoom. I'm sorry, you're seriously mistaken, because you have already built up a lot of bad mental and psychological habits, right? That you let yourself get away with less. And then what happens is that you find hard to then channel that energy. So I think it's important for us to, I'm not saying that you need to be always on top of your game, right? As we all have, I think there's a hustle culture out there that's really causing a lot of burnout. But it's also not possible to be always 100% intrinsically motivated, as you correctly say. I really love that piece. But it's also, I think we can find the intrinsic motivation in how we do that work. So very often we think of work as tasks. But I think what happens is, what people really also want is a sense of agency, a sense of autonomy to do their work, and agents, and also finally of efficacy. So I think agency, autonomy, and efficacy is very important. Agency, right, is being given the opportunity, right, to choose how you do the work.
Yes.
Right. So, for example, you're talking about you love teaching, right? Because you're a teacher at heart. So if you're a leader at work, for example, some leaders are great at, allocating resources. Some leaders are great at breaking down ideas and teaching them. And some leaders are great coaches. Right? So find what gives you intrinsic meaning.
Yes.
And go do that and lean on those strengths. Right? Lean on those strengths to help you to become a better leader. So that's the piece around agency. Autonomy, right, obviously is a little harder, especially if you are in a hierarchical culture. You don't have the autonomy to choose what projects you want to work on, right? But you can definitely have a career plan, right? It's like have a 5-year career plan, and have a plan about where you're going. Of course, nowadays 5-year career plans are out the window because of how fast things are moving, but still you need to have a plan, right? So you need to have a career plan about where you're going, and start to have the kind of proactive conversations with your managers and leaders about what are the kind of jobs that you want to do, what kind of projects that you want to do that will be in your zone of genius, or in your flow state, right?
Correct.
So you need to proactively do that, right? You cannot just wait to be given And of course, finally, efficacy. Efficacy is the idea of I can do this, right?
Believing yourself, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's nothing that's there's a worse that's the biggest drain on a person's confidence than being asked to do something that they don't believe they can do, right? And then no matter how much you trust yourself or believe in yourself, your confidence is going to slowly but surely ebb away if you constantly feel yourself fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah.
So I think
true.
there's so much that can be done here, to for HR and also for line managers and for organizations to create what you call systemic changes.
Yeah. I mean, just to add on to your point, I missed out this, and thank you for sharing, which is strengths. I think in positive psychology, strengths is such a fundamental topic that we often discuss about. And going back to that sailboat metaphor example again, I always tell people that strengths are like the sails that you put up for your boat. Sails are made of different materials, right? You want to find the right material that can capture the wind to propel you forward to your destination. There could be 3 or 4 people having the same destination, same goal, but you notice, how come this person rowed the boat faster than the other? Of course, let's not talk about the possibility of having more opportunities, but if, let's say, they all have the similar kinds of opportunities, it could be because of the strengths. What sail do you put up? Or what equipment or what weapons are you using to fight that war, to overcome that challenge, or to meet that goal that you want? So it's really understanding what are you really good at? How can that strengths also help you in the work that you do, regardless you're a leader or an employee or
Yeah, so I think it's really about practicing your strengths at work, right?
Correct.
So building those, like I said, good mental habits, right? And so I think there's this line by James Clear in his book Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
That I think you wrote this in your book as well, right? It says that you don't rise to your goals, the level of your goals, but you fall to the level of your practice.
Correct. Yeah. The systems that you put in place in order to meet that goal. Because another theory that I could share is also the Synder's Hope theory, SYNDER, where he says that when we talk about goal setting, there are 2 elements: agency and pathways. You might have the agency in telling people, I have this goal, I want to meet that goal, but where are your pathways? Are you able to chart out that multiple pathways that you are intending to take to meet that end goal? When we say multiple pathways, means if path A fail, do you then say, okay, that's it, I give up? But no, you have that multiple pathways mindset, and reach the end goal. Yeah.
I think just now we talk about the idea of deficit thinking, right? But and also the very, very big question, I know I'm going to lay a very big question on you. The meaning of education.
Yeah.
Right? And since when did we become so didactic that, our brain is tabula rasa, right? It's a blank canvas that we need to be, filled up with knowledge, and then we need to test people on their knowledge by standardized exams. Like, how did education become so didactic in the first place? Do you know the history of that?
Wow, I don't think I'm in a position to talk about that, but I guess I think slowly we are definitely adopting new teaching pedagogical approaches where it's not just didactic or one-way traffic, right? I think now we do so much like flip learning, experiential learning, allowing or blended learning, where students get to be part of that learning experience. In fact, one of my favorite learning approaches is inquiry-based learning, where students get to think of the questions that they are curious about, and they embark on their own learning journeys, and then they share with one another. So a bit like cooperative learning as well. So there's actually a lot of learning strategies that educators can adopt to make learning a bit more lively, a bit more enjoyable. So yeah, it used to be didactic, but I think I hope there could be more changes in this space as well. I mean, when I used to attend education conferences, there's always these few speakers who will come up to share about learning spaces. How do we design the spaces where it's not just, one student sitting to a table and then, like a distance apart, like taking an exam, that kind of classroom setting. So I think learning has changed, but definitely there's still more room for improvement in the way we design learning spaces for our students. And I don't know, I mean, for me, right, as I finished studying my positive psychology, I think teachers out there who might be listening, we always are very anxious, or maybe not say anxious, we are very focused on what are the learning outcomes, what are the assessments that we're going to do to make sure that we test our students, that they truly know what they have learned in our lessons or in classes, right? But I like to use positive psychology as a way to also challenge teachers to rethink about the classroom experiences that you are designing for your students. To me, I think education is not just about downloading technical knowledge onto them to make them career ready, but are we also helping them become life ready in terms of the soft skills, building their resilience? So I think it's a very holistic way of nurturing students. To me, that is what education should be.
That's one thing that just came to me as you're speaking, right? Is when we assess people on their ability to ace examinations, the question really is, what are we testing for?
Yeah.
We are testing for their ability to reproduce. So
regurgitate,
yeah. But maybe a nicer word would be reproduce, right? So for example, they receive the information and then they reproduce it on the exams. So they are assessed based on ability to reproduce. But when they go into the workplace, they are assessed by the ability to produce, not reproduce.
Yes.
And now that becomes that gap, right, isn't it? Right. Even for example, right now, as we're having this conversation, on the surface it looks like you're speaking from your knowledge bank and I'm speaking from my knowledge bank, but we are actually producing something.
Yes.
We are producing a podcast episode and we are producing new ideas, and to use your word, co-create.
Yeah.
So you bring your knowledge. That's not the way you're saying something. Knowledge transfer or
spillover.
Knowledge spillover. Yeah, or maybe knowledge synergy or knowledge
or
alchemy.
Transfer,
Right, so basically your knowledge and my knowledge, and it comes together and it metamorphosizes and it creates something new.
Yeah.
Right, so we're actually producing something.
Yes.
That's why we're saying content producers, right? But it's like an education system that trains us to be reproducers, and then when we go into the workplace, we're expected to be producers. That becomes a big gap, isn't it?
Yes, that is. And I think which is why, I can't speak so much about the primary, secondary education because I was in a tertiary institution most of the time. And I guess at the tertiary level, I'm also seeing the move away from examinations, but competency-based assessment. Are you able to perform this in the laboratory? So if let's say you are training, let's say in the aerospace industry, then it's really more about are you able to fix the airplane, for example. Even if you can ace your exams and you can't fix that, then that's it, right? The plane is going to crash, So really looking at very specific competencies tied to the professions that they are studying at. I think that is way more important than acing your results, So it's a different skill sets, I think. It's slowly evolving.
On that note, it just reminds me of an anecdote I just want to bring to the table as well. I was doing a interview skills training at a top junior college in Singapore.
Okay.
I think the students there are very humble. They have growth mindset. They're willing to learn. But I recall there was the way I teach interview skills is not just about having a engaging eye contact, shaking hands, and how do you place your body and how you sit. I teach a lot more things about your career direction. How do you tell the story of who you are?
Yeah.
How do you bring your unique self into the interview so that you give the interviewer a flavor of who you are beyond your resume?
Yes.
And I remember I was doing this exercise where one student just told me, I don't want to do this. And I said, well, we are here to find what's special about you. And he's like, there's nothing special about me. And so obviously he is in this 6-year program, 6-year kind of like through train program. And it's like, since secondary 1, he was already in the top school. And it's like, everybody here is so smart. There's nothing special about me. And it broke my heart. Because you're talking about a student in the top 1 to 2% of Singapore's cohort. But within the environment, the ecosystem of being surrounded by people who are just as bright, smart, capable, or very colourful CCA records, they feel small.
Yes.
And I was just wondering also, just a thought experiment, I was just wondering if this person, I transport this person and put this person in a different school.
In a neighborhood school, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, where he became, where he actually is actually the top student. Would he have performed better? I don't know. Right? So I just feel that there's just so much competition, keeping up the Joneses and all that. So what do you say about that? How can we move away from that pressure or the temptation to just want to keep up with the Joneses?
Wow, I think this is really a marathon, if I would say. And there are many key stakeholders at play, and yeah, it's never easy. I cannot imagine, being in an elitist kind of like environment, it's challenging because the words that people use, what they say, in fact, I don't know whether I should share here, but I went through similar seasons. When I was in Sec 1, I was in a school. I don't want to say which school, but there was that elitist mindset to the point where students are discussing what was your PSLE aggregate score. And because I was the second lowest, and I have another best friend who is the lowest in our aggregate score, we were being asked to sit in a separate canteen table, not being able to mingle with the rest. Yeah.
What?
That was, discrimination during the first week of school. And I remembered on the fourth day, someone was posted into our class saying that she's a transfer from this particular secondary school, which is near my place. And I thought, wow, okay, I want to transfer to that school then. So it's a mutual swap. And that school is really a very normal, humble secondary school, if I would say. Students are not as highly academic performing. And when I was there, I remember the vice principal was telling me, yeah, you are the third highest PSL aggregate score among the whole cohort. And I really thrive better because it's more inclusive. And yeah, so I think I've not taught in an elitist school environment, but I can also imagine the kind of stress, the kind of classroom culture. That's the word to use. What kind of classroom culture do we build then? And I think for me, when I was an educator, I always tell my students, let's build a positive peer culture. And the first way to do it is embracing each and everybody's strengths. So like what you rightly pointed out, having a narrative of what your strength is. Because when the stories that you tell yourself are labels like, I'm not good enough, I'm this, I'm that, you will find it very hard for you to even, don't say thrive, even survive, in an environment where people think highly of themselves. And I think these are the people that I will keep a lookout for as a teacher. Those with low self-esteem, those who think that they are not good enough. Having that side private conversation, helping them understand, where their unique strengths are and allowing them to embrace their own self-identity. And at the same time, also managing those who might be overly confident that will go around, boasting about themselves and say, hey, let's not create that kind of culture. Because I remember I once said, if I catch you boasting about yourself and trying to be an arrogant kid, telling people how good are you, you come and boast to me because Mr. Matthew is way better and more successful than you. Choose the right person to boast to. That kind of thing. Use a bit of humor. Just to inject in and say, yeah, you want to boast, right? You boast to me. I will show you all my successes, achievements, and accolades, and all those things. And I think that was when the culture starts to change.
Nice.
You might be good at one thing, but there must be something that somebody else is still better than you, and you learn from one another. We're not here to discriminate. We are here to learn and empower each other. And I think that was what made my classroom, the peers, have good connections and learning comes alive, I would say, because it's a safe space. It's similar to an organization, right? As a teacher, you are that authoritative figure, and what you say, what you do, how you guide your students can really have a very different outcome in terms of your classroom dynamics, So I think this is where, we as teachers have to come in and influence them in a right way.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Wow. Actually, I read your book, right? And I would say that I love the title of the book, Teach Less, Coach More. But my summary for it is, be Socratic, not didactic.
Yeah.
But of course, but of course, you put in very simple language, right? Teach less, coach more, right? So what really struck me about your book, right? I think the essence of it is you treat your students as adults, right? I think in
Yes.
transaction analysis, we call this an adult-to-adult relationship
Mm.
rather than having a parent-child relationship. I think that's such a big transformation, right? I think at the heart of it is really that transformation, that change in the way you relate to them. Because if you infantilize the students, then what happens is that people will end up playing into the identity aspect of them. Right? If you think of them as kids who don't know how to think for themselves, they will become kids who don't know how to think for themselves.
Yeah.
But they will openly rebel and do everything to show that they can think for themselves.
Mm.
But if you treat them as adults, you are actually inviting them to the table as equals. Right? I really, really like that part about your book. Right? So my question then to you, right, is how difficult or easy is it for you to bring out the adult side of students when you try to have an adult to adult relationship with them? Do you still get met with resistances? Do you still
Mm.
get met with times when they come to you and say, no, I just want you to tell me what to do?
Mm. I think in order to have that adult to adult kind of conversation, I think number one is coming back to that topic again. How trustworthy are you to the students? When students find that you are someone whom they can trust, whom they can confide in, they tend to open up. So it's coming back to the words that we use as we converse with them, you know. So to me, it's really from that posture of care. We care first before we do anything. Even when a student don't do well in the exams or tests, I don't think we want to go in and use a mark or a grade to determine a person's self-identity. You know, I give you an example. I once coached a parent. This parent was so worried about the son because he's not doing well in his tests, exams, and assessments. So I asked the parent, the father, what have you tried so far? And he said this, yeah, I've been telling my boy, hey, you got to study harder, you know. I'm very worried about you. I'm very worried about you. Notice in that conversation, the focus is on the father. I am worried because of you. But if you were to turn it around and say, I noticed that you have not been doing well, and as your father, I care for you, would you be able to share with me what's going on in your life? It's never about the results first, but it's about that student first. So I think as a teacher, when we want to go in to have adult-to-adult conversations, it comes back to how much care do you have for that boy or that girl or that student? How much respect do you have for them, regardless of what kind of behaviors that he might be? So I always tell teachers, every misbehavior that you see in class, there's always a story behind it. Are you curious enough to explore what that is? Because I think if you read my book, I shared this coaching mindset of an educator, ABCD, right?
Yep.
And C is curiosity.
Yeah.
We always tell students, please be curious to learning. You need to read beyond your textbooks and read beyond this. As a teacher, are you curious about your students' behaviors and the stories behind it? I'm not saying that we need to be nosy and, being a kepo, That's not what I meant. But before we are quick to judge about a student's behavior, can we press the pause button and ask ourselves, what might have resulted in that particular behavior? Because when we go in with a non-judgmental mindset, and it's out of curiosity that we are exploring, that conversation naturally becomes an adult-to-adult conversation. It's not like a parent-kid where I'm here to lecture you, I'm here to tell you what you have done wrong. And so that's how I think, some tips and strategies. I'm not saying that it will work every time also. There are also those extreme, very rebellious teenagers or youths that it might not work. And I also tell teachers that if this is the response that you get, also need to have self-compassion, because relationships and trust needs time to build up.
Yeah.
It's
True
never
that.
a one-off thing.
True that. And so there's this other piece you need to reverse, right? Because in your A, B, C, D, right, your A is actually authority less.
Yeah.
I caught that part and I was like, that's so hard to achieve, right? Because many people who became teachers obviously were raised in an education system where the teachers were the absolute authority.
Yeah.
So when they become the teacher, they almost sometimes put on a front to, I need to assert my authority, otherwise my students will climb all over me.
Yeah.
Otherwise I will have no influence over them. So how then do you reverse this mindset that they need to armor up and be authority and be authority less?
Yeah. I think people always ask me, what makes a good teacher? A good teacher is one who is firm yet approachable. Yeah, I know it's very deep. Firm in a sense, so for me, whenever I go into a class, the first lesson is the most important because I set my classroom rules very clearly. No this, no that, So even if you start talking, so I'm not that kind of, so I always tell teachers, don't shout, don't scream. If they talk, right, for example, I'll do it the adult way. I will pause and I'll be silent and I'll look at you to hint you that I'm sorry, but you are disrupting my lesson now. And if you get it and you stop talking, I will continue. Only if you don't stop talking, then I'll call out your name. But I will never shout and scream. I won't do that. Because I tell them, I want to respect you as an adult. And I trust and I know that all of you here are mature adults, that you also respect me as well. So let's create this, meaningful learning experience and learning space together. So when you show up as such an educator where you respect them and you show them what mutual respect means, and yet also opening up that door and telling your students that if you are struggling with your studies and you need someone to talk to, come to me. My door is always open.
Wow. Wow. That's fantastic regulation of your own emotions and your own nervous system, right? Because very often it's like when we need to shout and what is because we're in a heightened state. We ourselves are already also in a state of cortisol, stress induced. Maybe we're triggered. We are, when we're in the heightened state, our nervous system is out of whack.
Yes.
Right? We are activated. Right, so when we are activated, what happens is that you also then triggers the activation in the other person, and then it becomes just a tug of war. It becomes just an emotional battlefield, right? But I mean, when did you realize that you have this sense of serenity, this sense of knowing who you are, what you have to offer, and being able to bring that across so powerfully?
Wow, okay, this is very deep. I think it really comes back to my own childhood as well. So growing up in a dysfunctional family, at the age of 17, I got to do a lot of part-time work to make the ends meet in my family. And back then, as a 17-year-old, when I look at what skill sets I have, I could only think of one thing. I study very hard. I can do very well in my exams. So I go and become a tuition teacher. I go and teach tuition to small kids. I became a piano teacher as well. And I think it was through that teaching process where I'm able to help teenagers find back their own self-identity. I even taught abings before, who go gang fight, go and smoke that kind. And their school teachers gave up on them, this group of them. And they found their own identity in music. They play music together. And one of them actually learned piano with me. And I asked him, as a 16-year-old boy back then, I said, why do you want to learn piano? And he said this, because my teachers have given up on me. And I think what I do best is in music. I can play the drums, I can play the guitar. So the next natural thing that I want to learn is to learn how to play the piano. I have my own band.
Wow.
And I think that was when I was curious and I said, what did your teacher say about you? And what made you think that just because your teacher said that, you decided not to study hard or, to give it a shot? And say, yeah, they just told me that I'm hopeless. Long story short, so I said, why not give yourself a chance? I teach tuition. Why not I tutor you? And then he said this, being a typical, you want to tutor me? I got one whole group to tutor, It's not just me. My whole gang must come. So I tutored that group of boys and they did well. They got A2 and B3, for O-levels. And the best part was, when they got their results, their O-level results, the teacher said like, wow, congratulations, y'all did well. And they went up to shame the teacher and said, we are able to succeed and do well. It's not because of you. I'm sorry. It's because of our tuition teacher who believed in us. And I think that was when I started realizing I have this talent in shaping and nurturing youth. And when I was a polytechnic student, I met one of the most inspiring teachers that really crossed paths with my life, and she's so inspiring. She's that kind of lecturer where she steps into the classroom. We all want to sit at the first row. It's like as if we are watching Taylor Swift concert, Cat 1 tickets. Yeah, we want to sit at the first row because she used a lot of lived experiences. she will never be satisfied with just the same teaching material. She aims to keep improving it so that learning comes alive. And I learned so much from her. She became my mentor. And that is also why, I once hear of this statement which says, your deepest pain will become your greatest ministry. And when I asked myself, actually the deepest pain that I experienced in my life was when I was figuring out how to navigate through this dysfunctional family when I was at the age of 17, 18, when I was a tertiary student. And which is why I know how it felt, being a student who is struggling, but yet there was this teacher out there who didn't give up on me. And I think because I went through it myself, as a product of a teacher who didn't give up on me, when I became an educator, I realized I was very intentional. It was a different lens that I put on. It was and I think it's because of what I've been through. Hence, I take a lot of pride whenever I step into the classroom. I tell myself, I'm not here to instruct, I'm here to inspire. So, and that's what I really hope for all educators out there as well, that you never know. I was that student who thought that my life was a mess, but a teacher didn't give up on me, and I became that teacher. And then students who came from dysfunctional families similarly came up to me and shared with me their problems, and I inspired them. And some of them tell me they want to be a teacher one day. Can you see that effect? And I tell people, it's amazing, right? And so I always tell teachers, yes, burnout is real, it's a stressful job, but don't devalue or underestimate the power of your job. This, to me, teaching, I always tell people it's like Harry Potter. You're a wizard. You go in, you can cast spells because you have the authority figure, right? But you have a choice what kind of spells you want to cast. Spells of inspiration, motivation, curiosity, creativity, or do you cast spells of anger, frustration, just because you have a bad day, or just because a student misbehaves and you just lose it, so yeah.
Wow. You share a lot about your teaching experience, and I think that's where you are really at your best. And I see you flourish right before my eyes as well.
Thank you.
Matthew, I also met you at a time that's very interesting for me as well. I'm also going through a pivot. Having been corporate trainer, speaker for some time, and I'm really looking for my next mountain in my life. And I only also recently just discovered that I'm extremely good at giving voice to the voiceless. Because personally I was silenced as a child growing up, and one of the things that my father often say to me is that whatever you say don't even pass the common sense test. And so that always made me felt very misunderstood, and that I don't have a voice. And so becoming a speaker is the first act in my story, which is to discover my own voice. But now as I'm embarking on the second act, right, it's about helping people to discover their voice. It's giving voice to the voiceless. And so for me, that's really what drives me. It's very clear to me that you have a very clear purpose, and I think you already alluded to that earlier on. But my question to you is, many people are out there looking for their purpose in life.
Yeah.
And of course, one of the common thing that they'll look at you and go, yeah lah, because you have your experience and you found your calling, right, in teaching. But what if I haven't found that calling yet?
I think it's important to look at it from different angles. Number one, ask yourself what constitutes meaning in your life. I remember we had this conversation. A lot of people may chase after happiness. And I always feel that happiness is really elusive. It's not something that is sustainable in terms of chasing it. But if you were to ask yourself, when was the last time you felt that sense of meaning and purpose? And even if you tell me, say, no, I have no such experiences before, then my question back to you would be, what are some alternative sources of meaning that you have not explored before, but you think you might be keen to try out? And this is also something that actually youths also struggled with at times, where under the domain of interest, what are you interested in? And you notice a lot of students, especially those who deem academic results as very important, they will always say that my interest is studying. my interest is I just want to get good results. I don't have hobbies. I just go home and I'll just study. And I always encourage you, stretch yourself, try new things. You know, when students come up to me or people come up to me and say, hey, you know, Matthew, I feel like learning a foreign language. Go and learn, please. Don't stop yourself. Because the more you learn, the more you put yourself out there in having different lived experiences, you are actually going through a funneling process. It's like a filter funnel. Sorry, I used to be a science teacher, right? So you know filter funnel, right? you have so much at the top.
Yeah.
But as you filter it through, you finally found that filtrate that passes through and say, yeah, this is what I really like. And the residue is all stuck at the top. But at least you try it.
Yeah.
So when people come and tell me, yeah, you know, Matthew, I've tried A, but I really don't like it. So as a coach, I say, so what exactly do you not like about that? I think that is important rather than just using a generic statement, say, I don't like it. What exactly is it? Because that is also a form of feedback to you as you try to navigate and explore what suits you better. Knowing what doesn't suit you is actually bringing yourself one step closer to find out what suits you. So I tell people, don't be too discouraged when you know that something doesn't suit you. I mean, we are all humans. Of course, negative emotions will come, but don't let that overpower and make it so overwhelming to the point where we find that we are so paralyzed that we couldn't move forward.
Yeah.
So it comes back to me, the element of interest. What are you interested to explore? Yeah.
I think also that's not just the interest as well, but also the context of that interest. So, for example, like if you go and learn something like, for me, right, I love to play badminton. So when I was young, my father would bring me to go and play badminton with his colleagues every Saturday, and so I was playing with adults even as a very young child. But my primary school didn't have badminton as a CCA, so I never actually learned and play badminton at a very, very formal level. So I think it's also important, like to your words earlier on, finding opportunities, right? Finding the opportunities, finding the context, and so that's another thing about badminton, right? So another sport I love to play is snooker and pool, and I actually invested in buying my own cue and everything, and I go and play. But it's also hard to find people of the same level of interest or the same level of competency. So I play with my friends who are not very serious one. Then I don't really have the same joy. I mean, not that I'm judging them.
Yeah.
But when I go and play with people who are really passionate about it, right? There's this kind of braggy kind of context to it. It's like, if I'm very good, I can shoot the balls into the pocket in one cue. I can finish the game. Then that they will feel a little, proud and arrogant and braggy about it, right? And then I also don't like that also, because it becomes like every game is like a competition, and it just takes the joy of the game away from me. So I think it's also important to find not only your interest but also the people to do it with. People who can really,
Definitely. And I think it comes back to that flow model that we talk about.
Yeah.
When the skill sets and the challenge are on par, you are engaged, you are in flow.
Yeah.
But when your skill sets are high but the challenge is low, you get bored by it. Which explains when you shared that you play with some of your friends who are more amateurish. At the same time, if you play with really high level experts who might be a bit, braggy, proud, your skill sets are lower than the challenge that is presented to you, you might feel a bit anxious, and the whole game you feel like you're not in the flow anymore.
Wow, I love it. I love how you describe
this. So if you look at these three outcomes, it's either you're anxious, you're in flow, or you are bored.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling bored, then how do you level up the challenge? Same thing in school. I always tell my students that, what are your emotions? How do you feel when you're learning math, for example? Anxious, in flow, or bored? So if you're anxious, it means that the challenge level is too high. Can we bring the level down? Sometimes the level is already down. It's just that you paralyze yourself. You look at what is the topics at the back and wow, it looks very difficult. I think I'm going to die. I don't think I'll do well. One step at a time, one chapter at a time, one page at a time. Same thing, right? So it's about how do you then dial it up and dial it down. The skills level, so that you feel that you are in that state of flow. Finding the right person.
Wow, love it. I think I've read Csikszentmihalyi's book on flow, right?
Correct.
But I think you just synthesize it and explain that model the best way I've ever heard before. It's like that's That's awesome. Thanks for
Thank
sharing
you.
that. That's very, very powerful. So Matthew, it's been such a great conversation. We want to almost like land this plane. I know, right? I can talk to you for hours on end, but
Yeah, I'm sure.
I just want to land this plane. So normally we ask our guests some quick fire questions to end the podcast,
Sure.
and the quick fire is just like 1 or 2 sentences. But if you feel the compulsion to share more, well, you may go on. Yeah.
Sure.
So are you ready for the quick fire?
Yes.
Quick fire round. Right, cool. First question. What's the most powerful question you have ever been asked before?
Wow. Most powerful question. What made you think you're not good enough?
Wow.
It's a question that I heard, but it's not directed towards me. It was a coaching demonstration between 2 master certified coaches, and that really made I had goosebumps when I heard that. What made you think that you were not good enough? Because this person was saying, I don't think I'm good enough. For me as a coach, I might even follow up with this question and say, so what does it take to become good enough?
Yeah.
But she instead asked, what makes you think you're not good enough? And I think, wow. I mean, there are times where I do doubt my own self-doubt, imposter syndrome, right? So this question is very powerful for me to reflect.
Love it. I'm writing this question down. I'm tattooing this question in my head so that I can ask myself this question to snap out of it whenever I'm allowing myself sabotaging negative self-belief and negative self-talk to take me out of the game. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Next question. Who is a mentor or supporter who has made the biggest difference in your life?
Wow, I think it's definitely the person that I also wrote about in my acknowledgements in the book. She was that lecturer who I show up every time for her lesson at the first row, Mrs. Ngan. Yeah, she has passed on sadly, but I've known her since I was 17, all the way to I think when I was 36, 21. Yeah, about 21 years. Yeah, so she journeyed with me as a teacher, as a mentor, as a colleague, as my boss, my ex-boss, and yeah, she's one of the greatest blessings that I ever had in my life.
Thank you. And you're passing it forward.
Yes, definitely.
What's one of the most courageous things you've done in your life that's made all the difference?
Oh my goodness, quitting my job and setting up my business. This is really something that I wouldn't have imagined that I would do it. Yeah, because these are all the weaknesses. I don't like to take risks. I don't like to be on an adventure. Yeah, I need stability. So it was a very uncomfortable move, but yet I wanted to bring my voice out to share how important positive side is, and that's why I made that move. Yeah.
And I mean, we are all benefiting from that courageous move you made, right? It's like your voice ring loud and clear. Your voice have invigorated even my own journey, and I'm really very very gratified and to have met an ally in you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Matthew, for being on this podcast. If our guests would like to find out more about you, where can they find out?
I think they can connect me on LinkedIn, search for Matthew Koh, or you can check out my website, thepositivearena.com. And yeah, I also have a podcast, the Positive Arena podcast on Spotify. But yeah, I've stopped doing that, but there are 20 episodes still lying there. So if you want to know more about positive side, well-being with different speakers that I've invited, yeah, do feel free to support.
And also, if you would like to get a copy of your book,
yes, yeah.
How can they get a copy of that book?
Oh, they can visit my website. They can buy it directly from there. So if they are stationed in Singapore, they can get a signed copy. It's $25 per copy. I'll mail it to your place. So yeah.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed my time here. Thanks, Coen.
Thanks, Matthew.